There you go.
No, I'm good.
Run out and quickly flow to water. Are you guys going to be putting on We're going to start in just a minute. Come on in. That's the chairs over for you and Jamie over by Jennifer. It's a quiet room full of bodies and people. Hi, welcome everyone. For those who use the mic, we've got it set up so you can stand pretty far back. I think we might have to take a little bit off the mic. Whoever's working with our audio, I hear some feedbacky stuff that's happening. So if you want to take a little edge off that, yeah, that's better. Thank you. Welcome to the Poetry Center, and it's our honor today to be hosting Simon J. Ortiz, who is here from the American Southwest, from across the bay, from South Dakota, Mexico, but first from the Acoma Pueblo, and from that place and those people. And we're just totally delighted to have him back at San Francisco State. We went through the history, and if you saw any of the promotions for this event, you would see that there's a link to see a reading that Simon did here in 1975. And so that was a minute ago, and it's a beautiful, beautiful reading. And yes, absolutely in a whole other world in some sense, and so a few years ago, John Carlos Perea, who I've known for some time, said, I'm working on some stuff and, talking to Simon Ortiz, let's get him on campus. And when was that, a few years ago? 15? Something like that, yeah. And then, a year ago, we hosted Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, and she said, I think someone's living in the Bay Area. And so tracked him down, and he agreed to be with us today. And also this Saturday off campus, we're doing a reading along with the poet Jennifer Elise Forster, who is also a Native American Indigenous poet and has done a lot of work on anthologizing the work of contemporaries, and worked with Joy Harjo on a big anthology that came out not long ago. And so she will be joining Simon, and that event is Saturday, 3 p.m. in the Mission at a place called Medicine for Nightmares, and formerly Alley Cat Bookstore, but it's Medicine for Nightmares Bookstore and Gallery, and it has under new ownership. It's on 24th Street, right near Harrison. And so you're all welcome to attend or tell friends that couldn't make it here today. And both these events are being live streamed, and so we wanted to start close to 1, catch the live stream people, and I've asked John Carlos Perea to do the honors of introducing Simon Ortiz. So John Carlos Perea.
So on behalf of the Poetry Center and the Department of American Indian Studies and the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State University, I would like to welcome everyone here in person and on the live stream to a solo reading and conversation with Simon J. Ortiz from Acoma Pueblo in New Mexico. Thank you very much to everyone whose time and effort has made the event possible today. Thank you very much. My name is John Carlos Perea. My mother is Barbara Perea from Belmont, Long Island, New York, and my father is Jacob Perea from Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm the department chair and associate professor of American Indian Studies, specializing in Native American music and specifically Native American jazz musicians. I'm really honored to be here today because Simon's interviews in Sandy Osawa's documentary called Pepper's Powwow had a profound effect on me when I was coming up as a jazz musician and then later as a graduate student. I should also say that Simon was part of my tenure case. Without Simon, I literally wouldn't be here. So in the process of getting ready for today, I went back to that film and I just wanted to return briefly to a statement that Simon made there. Quote, too often, the American public wants a certain version of Indian, of Native American, and that goes with our art. They don't want us to go outside those so-called norms. It's not Indian to be a poet. It's not Indian to be a jazz musician. It's not Indian to be a rock and roll star, which is really kind of silly because that's not what art is about. I wanted to return to this quote today because I think that Simon's work as a poet, a short fiction writer, an essayist, a storyteller, and a documentary filmmaker speaks strongly to the continuing need to keep challenging those so-called norms that he identified for us as artists so that we can all better understand not just what art is, but what it could be. As a musician and a teacher, I also want to recognize Simon's teaching at San Diego State University, Lewis and Clark College, University of New Mexico, University of Arizona Summer School, and Arizona State University, where he was Regents Professor of English and Indigenous Studies. He has also taught at University of Toronto, Colorado College, Navajo Community College, and Sinte Gleska University. Now retired, Simon continues as a poet, a short fiction writer, authors essays from time to time, and does readings of his poetry, short fiction, and oral Indigenous narratives. Presently, he's working on a memoir, a short fiction collection, a book of his essays, and an American Indigenous epic. Simon's well-known books include Woven Stone, From Sand Creek, Beyond the Reach of Time and Change, Fightin, New and Collected Stories, The People Shall Continue, The Good Rainbow Road, and many more. His newest book, Light is Light, will come from the University of Arizona Press in 2023. Please join me in welcoming Simon J. Ortiz.
Let's see. Kaitala Chawashkis. In the language of my Hano or people, that means hello, how are you? And I'm really glad to be here with you this afternoon and to share with you not only my poetry, but at least one story, and to meet you, all of you, as a community of course, San Francisco State University as an institution, but also, of course, part of San Francisco and the Bay Area, and for all of you who are from here and perhaps away from here, wherever you are from, we are all part of each other. And I always have to remind myself that when I meet people, they're not sometimes from the area where we meet, but they may be from elsewhere. And we are really part of our own world, which we share. Even if you're from, say, Mars or out of this solar system, you still are here, and you are from there, and you are part of everything that is taking place right now, this day. So in that sense, thank you for having me be with you this afternoon and to share some of my poems and at least one story. And I think that with our voices in some kind of shared brotherhood, sisterhood, we are part of each other, which is really, I believe, what poetry is about. Poetry is really a sharing and a voicing of ourselves for the sake of our voice, but also the voices of each other, everyone's voices. So I want to also refer to Jim Pepper and his beautiful music. Jim Pepper is in the past, of course, but of course he was here. And Jim and I met here in San Francisco when he came to do some music at one of the jazz clubs downtown. And then later on, when I went to live in Portland, I met his family, his mom and dad, and other relatives, and I heard him do his music there. And then, of course, he was a much well-known jazz musician, and beautiful, I think, very, very important person in my life, from whom I learned a lot and how to really share with others, share not only with stories, but personally in conversations and experiences at events, and certainly the experience of his music. And that is what poetry is, I believe. I feel that it's important to share that kind of happening. I want to start out with a poem that expresses that, and in fact, it's features or includes Jim Pepper, the musician, saxophone, one of the best at the time of his life, I would say. Of course, I'm very also prejudicial, biased on his behalf. So I want to read this poem called Always the Song for Jim Pepper, brother, friend, who died February 10, 1992. Just recently, I've been trying to remember my dreams, Jim. Too often, I've not bothered to recall them, even arrogantly thinking they were irrelevant, thinking I didn't have to recall them. But now, lately, I've said to myself, I must remember my dreams. I was waiting, and I had been waiting for a while. It was early morning, very early, and it was still dark. But there were brilliant distant stars that early morning. The night before, there had been a new moon in the west, and now, at its crescent stage, there was an aura of light. I was at the woodpile, the old woodpile, when I was a boy. Nearby, 30 yards away, was my boyhood home, where, in this time, place of the early morning, past and present, my mother and other family members were fast asleep. I had just come out of a small adobe cabin where I lived, and I sat down on an upended pinon log at the woodpile. All around was a gentle odor of juniper and pinon wood and kindling in the cool air of the season of the dream. I was waiting, but I didn't actually know why I was waiting. But I felt good about it until I was patient and peaceful. I was relaxed and watchful in the early, early morning. Above and all around was a huge, limitless dark sky. There was no definite reason apparent, nothing at all, but there was no definite season apparent, nothing at all. But it was comfortable, and I was content to be waiting. Then, just as I turned my head eastward, looking to see if the dawn light was soon to be showing on the horizon, I heard noises coming toward me from the southwest. Someone was coming out of the early morning dark, approaching the woodpile where I was sitting on the log. My attention was drawn to two men who greeted me, hailing me, hello, laughing softly, speaking familiarly and warmly. Looking closely at them and squinting my eyes, I recognized Jim Pepper, who smiled that boyish, open, teasing smile of his, and I instantly felt joyful to hear his murmuring laughter, and I waved my hand at him. I didn't move from the pinon log I was sitting on as I watched him begin to unpack his saxophone. The other musician, a guitarist friend of his, began to come to tune up, also getting ready to play. Looking over at me as he fixed his mouthpiece, Jim said something which I didn't quite hear, and he laughed softly aloud as I nodded my head. Yes, yes, I meant, yes, I want to hear your music. Nothing would make me happier than to hear the music you share with your soul, heart, and spirit. I nodded. When he and the guitarist began to play their music, I did worry momentarily about how loud it might be because of my relatives sleeping in the house nearby. However, after looking toward the eastern horizon and seeing the approaching dawn, I decided, yes, how wonderful it would be for the world to wake up to the soaring eagle flight music of Jim Pepper. And I remembered the song that came to me years ago as part of the story of Wren, who is just a little bird when he was told his this song was for the awakening of all creation. Yes, yes, I motioned with my hands. It is wonderful to awaken in the morning with the rest of all creation. And the song of the eagle and the wren and the song of all myriad and wonderful, wondrous beings and items of life whirled all around as Jim's breath became an exaltation of the song of our souls, hearts, and spirits. The song surrounded me in the whirl of that dawn. It wove me into the universe of mountains, plains, oceans, skies, galaxies all around, all the plant and animal world we know and don't know. It took my life into a dimension not mine anymore, but was the song of a world that could only belong to Earth, the mother which is the creation and existence of all things. Ever so powerfully, the music was urgent and yet soothing and soaring, like I've always known for Jim Pepper's music to be, ever so insistent for the world to awaken and go forth. Always the song that is the earth's and ours will urge us to help each other and to be together on this our journey. On the early morning of that recent dream, I was happy and grateful to wake to a song that called upon all life to go forth into the light of the world that was now the dawn. Thank you. Dawa I said softly. Thank you, Jim, for the song of the dawn this morning. Thank you for that. I miss Jim at times, from time to time, and so in his honor and in his memory, his spirit, and song is all part of us. I want to read a bit from Sand Creek because well, the poems came about in the 1970s when I was a patient or inmate or, well, a sick person who was trying to sober up. And I was in a program in Fort Lyons, Colorado, with the Veterans Administration. And I had, of course, been drinking for many, many years. And I know that for many of us as indigenous people, alcohol use and alcohol sickness called alcoholism was a feature of my life and a feature of the lives of many men, women, young people, older people. And I was sent up there because it included, of course, people who were non-indigenous, I mean, of all different kinds of ethnic peoples, and it was I would say, a good program, and it helped me. It helped me not immediately, because even though I went through the course at that time, that one time, it was a time that was a real struggle for me. Anyway, I met guys up there within that, within the condition of that Veterans Administration program to help people deal with their alcoholism. And so it began one of the ways in which I became eventually sober, not for a couple more decades, of course, but it was a start. And so I wrote a book wrote really notes during the time that I was an inmate within the program. And I called it From Sand Creek because it occurred to me that all of us who were veterans then in the 70s, some of us had been veterans from the Vietnam War that was taking place, from the 60s, and of course extended into the early 70s. Still when I was there, it was still going on in the early 70s. And so when I thought about it, and the United States actions to commit itself as a government and as a military forcefulness in attacking, the land and the people of Vietnam. There were, to me, so many, in a sense, parallels, like what took place in the mid-1800s, 1850s, 1860s, and attacks made upon just huge numbers of people, of our people, attacking the nation of the indigenous peoples. And so I felt that it was very, very similar to what was taking place in Vietnam at that time. And so I wrote some poems eventually from my notes, and this was published later on. And I'll start out with this one. Buffalo were dark, rich clouds moving upon the rolling hills and plains of America. And then the flashing steel came upon bone and flesh. Is a statement in prose, and then followed by a poem. Acres across which to run. Who forsook these ones? A cow stolen from her memory, the wild breed of Europe, of Africa, of Asia, does not agitate the wheat fence. Buffalo ghosts hurtle away, no gentle sigh to cling to. They rode like steel, blades flashing, sighs, we grasp. Who watches now? In this hemisphere, corn is ancient and young. It is the seed, food, and symbol of a constantly developing and revolutionary people. And the poem. Don't fret now. Songs are useless to exculpate sorrow. That's not their intent anyway. Strive for significance. Cull seeds from grass. Develop another strain of corn. Whisper for rain. Don't fret. Warriors will keep alive in the blood. There were, of course, numbers of us who were indigenous. Of course, the words that we used at that time, we still use. I don't much use it. I prefer were indigenous. Indians, yes, there were many hundreds of Indians in the vets. It's true. There are ghost towns all over the West. Some are profitable tourist attractions of the frontier, quote unquote. Others are merely sad and unknown. And the poem. What should have been important and fruitful became bitter, wasted. Spots appeared on their lungs, marrow dried in their bones. They ranted. Pointless utterances. Truth did not speak for them. It is a wonder they even made it to California. But of course, they did, and they named it success, conquest, destiny. Frontiers ended for them, and a dread settled upon them, and became remorseless, nameless, namelessness. There is a revolution going on. It is very spiritual, and its manifestation is economic, political, and social. Look to the horizon and listen. The poem. The mind is then stunned, stark. At night, Africa is the horizon. The cots of the hospital are not part of the dream. Lie awake, afraid, thinned breath. Was it a scream again? Far below, the basement speaks for Africa. Saigon, Sand Creek. Souls gather around campfires. Hills protect them. Mercenaries gamble for odds they will never know. Indians stalk beyond the dike, carefully measure the distance, count their bullets. Stark, I said, stunned at night in the VAH. Sand Creek, where the massacre, of course, took place of indigenous people. Was not very far away. And, that was part of the experience of being a innate citizen, indigenous person at Fort Bryan, Veterans Administration. And that's this last one from that same group. The blood poured onto the plains, stemming like breath on winter mornings. The breath rose into the clouds and became the rain, and replenishment. My poem just sorry, I thought it was all. They were amazed at so much blood, spurting, sparkling, splashing, bubbling, steady, hot arcing streams, red and bright and vivid onto the grassy plains, steaming so brightly and amazing they were all. It almost seemed magical that they had so much flood. It just kept pouring like rivers, like endless floods from the sky, thunder that had become liquid, and the thunder surged forever into their minds. Indeed, they must have felt they should get on their knees and drink the red, rare blood, drink to replenish their own vivid loss. Their hopeless hands were like sea. And then the last poem really is a conclusion, but also a responsibility. That dream shall have a name after all, and it will not be vengeful, but wealthy with love and compassion and knowledge, and it will rise in this heart, which is our America. And it's a good dream. I think that I will go ahead and read that story called Change Life in a Good Way, which is from Man on the Moon, one of my short fiction pieces. That's really what I haven't written a story for a long time, and I've been getting lonely and feeling negligent. I want to write more stories, because there are stories that need to be told to heal for me and for others. For much healing to go on in this nation called the United States. To change life in a good way. Again, it refers to Vietnam War. Bill and Ida lived in the mobile home park west of Milan. They had come out with Colonel McGee when the company first started sinking shafts at Ambrosia Lake in New Mexico. That would be in 58 or 59. Bill was an electrician's helper and Ida was a housewife, though for a while she worked over at that 24-hour catch-all store. But mostly she liked to be around home, the trailer park, and tried to plant a little garden on the little patch of clay land that came with the mobile home. She missed Oklahoma like Bill did too. He always said they were going to just stay long enough to get a down payment, save enough for some acreage in eastern Oklahoma around Eufaula. That's what he told Pete, the Laguna Pueblo man he came to be friends with at Section 17. Pete worked as a lift operator, taking men into and out of the mine. Once in a while, they worked the same shift and rode carpool together. You're lucky you got some land, Pete, Bill would say. It's not much, but it's some land, Pete would agree. Pete and Mary, his wife, had a small garden, which they would plant in the spring. Chili, couple rows of sweet corn, squash, beans, even had lettuce, cucumbers, and radishes, onions. They irrigated from the Rio de San Jose, a small stream that runs through Acoma and Laguna Pueblo lands. Ida had just had red clay ground that she had planted that the first string with lettuce and radishes and corn, but the only thing that ever really came up was the corn. And it was kind of stunted and wilty looking. She watered the little poor patch from the little green plastic hose hooked up to the town water system that started running dry about mid-June. One Saturday, Pete and Mary and Bill and Ida were all shopping at the same time at the Sturgis Food Mart in Milan, and the women became friends too. They all went over to the mobile home park and sat around and drank Pepsis and talked about family. Ida and Bill didn't have any kids, but Mary and Pete had 3. They're at home staying out of trouble, I hope, Mary said. Bill had a younger brother named Slick. He had a photo of him sitting on the TV stand shelf. Bill was proud of his little brother. He passed the black and white photo to Pete and Mary, and Slick was in the army. In Vietnam, Bill said. I worry about him some, but at least he's learned the trade. He's a Spec 4 in signal. Slick's been kind of wild, so I know about trouble. Ida took Mary outside to show her her garden. It's kind of hard trying to grow anything here, Ida said. Different from Oklahoma. I think you need something in it, Ida, to break up the packed clay, Mary said. Maybe some sheep stuff. I'll tell Pete to bring you some. The next weekend, Pete brought some sheep stuff and spread it around the wilty plants as in Ida's garden patch. Work it around and into the ground, Pete said, but it'll be till next year that it will get better. He brought another pickup load later on. Ida and Bill went down to Laguna to the reservation too, and they met Pete and Mary's kids. Ida admired their garden. Slick was visiting on leave from the army, and he came with them. He had re-upped, had a brand new Spec 5 patch on his uniform, and he had bought a motorcycle. He was on his way to another tour in Vietnam. I wish he hadn't done that, Bill said. Folks at home in Oklahoma are worried too. Good thing your boys aren't old enough. In the yard, the kids, including Slick, were playing catch with a softball. Slick wasn't much older than Pete and Mary's oldest. Slick had bright and playful eyes, a handsome boy, and Bill was right to be proud of his kid brother. I'm going to make sure that young Jackoff goes to college after the damn army, Bill said. After that, they would visit each other. Ida would come help Mary with her garden. A couple of times, the kids went to stay with Ida when Bill worked graveyard or swing at the mines because she didn't like to be alone. The kids liked that too, staying in town but there was of it at the edge of Milan at the mobile home amidst others sitting on the hard clay ground. The clay ground by the mobile home had come around to being somewhat more workable with the sheep stuff in it. Ida planted radishes and lettuce and carrots and corn, even tomatoes and chili, and she was so proud of her growing plants that summer. One afternoon, up at Section 17, Bill got a message from the shift foreman to call Ida. The crew was underground replacing wire, and he had to take the lift up. He had to call from the payphone outside the mine office. Pete held the lift for him. When he came back, Bill said, I gotta get my lunch pail and go home. Everything all right, Bill? Pete asked. You okay? Something happened to Slick, Bill said. The folks called from Claremore. Hope it's not serious, Pete said. On the way home after the shift, Pete stopped at Bill and Ida's in Milan. Ida answered the door and showed him in. Bill was sitting on the couch. He had a fifth of Heaven Hill halfway empty. Pete, Bill said, Slick's gone. No more Slick. Got killed, stepping on a mine. A goddamn American mine. Isn't that the shits? Pete, just look at that kid. Bill pointed at the photo on the TV stand. Pete didn't say anything at first, and then he said, Amo Yomo. And he put his arm around Bill's shaking shoulders. Bill poured him some Heaven Hill, and Ida told him they were leaving for Claremore the next morning as soon as they could pack their car and the bank open. Should get there by evening, she said, and then Pete left. When Pete got home to Laguna Pueblo, he told Mary what had happened. Tomorrow morning on your way to work, drop me off there. I want to see Ida, Mary said. You can drive me to work and take the truck, Pete said. That night they sat at the kitchen table with the kids and tied feathers and scraped cedar sticks and closed them in a corn husks with cotton, beads, pollen, and tobacco. The next morning, Mary and Pete went by the mobile home park. Bill and Ida were loading the last of their baggage into their car. After greetings and solaces, Mary said, We brought you some things. She gave Ida a loaf of Laguna bread. For your lunch, she said, and Ida put it in the ice chest. Pete took a white corn ear and the corn husk bundle out of a paper bag he was carrying, and he showed them to Bill. Pete said, This is just corn, Bill, Indian corn. The people call it kasheshi, just a dried ear of corn. You can take it with you to Oklahoma, or you can keep it here. You can plant it. It's to know that life will keep on. Your life will keep on. Just like Slick will be planted again. You'll be like that. Like seed planted, like corn seed, the Indian corn. But you and Ida, your life will grow on. Pete put the corn ear back into the bag, and then he held out the husk bundle. He said, I guess I don't remember some of what is done, Bill. Indian words, world songs for it, what it all is, even how this is made just a certain way. But I know that it is important to do this. You take this too, but you don't keep it. It's just for Slick, for his travel from this life among us to another place of being. For his travel from this life among us to another place of being. You and Ida and Slick are not Indian, but it doesn't make any difference. It's for all of us, this kind of way with corn and with this, Bill. You take these sticks and feathers and you put them somewhere you think you should, someplace important that you think might be good, maybe to change life in a good way, that you think Slick would be helping us with. You take it now, Pete said. I know it may not sound easy to do, but don't worry yourself too much. Slick is okay now. You'll be helping us, and you'll be fine too. Pete put the paper bag in Bill's hand, and they all shook hands and hugged, and Mary drove Pete on to section 17. After they left, Bill went inside the mobile trailer home and took the corn ear from the paper bag. He looked at it for a while, thinking, just corn, just Indian corn, just your life to go on, Ida and you. And then he put the corn by the photo by Slick on the TV stand. And then he wondered about the husk bundle. He couldn't figure it out. He couldn't figure it out. He had grown up in Claremont all his life. Indians living all around him in Oklahoma. Folks and some school teachers said so. Cherokees in the Ozark Hills, creeks over to Muskogee. But Mary and Pete were the first Indians he had come to know, he had ever known. Bill held the bundle in his hand, thinking, and then he decided not to take it to Oklahoma and got it and put it in the cupboard. They locked up the mobile home and left. Bill and Ida returned to Milan a week later. Most of the kinfolks had been at the funeral and everything had gone all right. The folks were upset a whole lot, but there wasn't much else to do except comfort them. Some of the folks said that someone had to make the sacrifice for freedom of democracy and all that, and that's what Slick had died of and for. He's done his duty for America. Look at how much and what past folks had to put up with, living a hard life, fighting off Indians to build homes on new land so we can have the way we can live the way we are right now, advanced and safe from communist terror like the Tulsa Tribune said the other day, Sunday. That's what Slick died for, just like past folks. That's what a couple of relatives had advised and said. And Bill had tried to say what was bothering him, that the mine Slick had stepped on was American, and that the fact he was in a dangerous place was because he was in an army that was American. And it wasn't the same thing as what they were saying about past folks fighting Indians for democracy, and it didn't seem right somehow. But nobody really heard him. They just asked him about his job with Kerr McGee and told him the company has built itself another building in Tulsa. Kerr's going to screw those folks in New Mexico just like he has folks here being senators, they said. Ida and Bill visited for a while and comforted his parents for a while, and then they left for Milan. By the time they got back to their mobile home, Bill knew what he was going to do with that bundle of sticks and feathers. He had been thinking about it all the way on I-40 from Oklahoma City, running it through his mind, what Slick had died of and for. Well, because of the mind, stepping on the wrong place, being in a dangerous place, but something else. The reason was something else, and though Bill wasn't completely sure about it yet, he felt he was beginning to know, and he knew what he was going to do with the bundle in the cupboard. The next morning, he put the husk bundle in his lunch pail and went to work, reporting to the mine office first. He changed into his work clothes and put on his yellow slicker because they were going down in the shaft that morning, and he was glad for that for once. He took the paper bag with the bundle out of his lunch pail, and put it in his overall pocket. After they went down on the lift, Bill said he was going to go and check some cable, and he made his way to the far end of a drift that had been mined out. He stopped and put the bundle down behind a slab of rock. Bill didn't know what to do next, and then he thought of what Pete had said. Say something about it. Well, Bill thought, Slick, you was a good boy. Kind of wild, but good. I got this here Indian thing, feathers and sticks, and at home we got the corn by your picture. Pete and Mary said to do this because it's important, even if we're Okies who do this and not Indians. It's for your travel, they said, from here to that place where you are now, and to help us from where you are at now with our life here. And they said to maybe change things in a good way for a good life. And God knows, us Okies have always wanted that. Well, I'm gonna leave this here by this rock, Bill said. Pete said he didn't know exactly all the right Indian things to do anymore, but somehow I believe Indians are more righter than we're ever been led to believe. And now I'm trying to. So you help us now, little brother Slick. We need it. All the help we can get. Even if it's just so much as holding up the roof of this mine. The damn company don't put enough timbers and bolts in. And then he stepped back from the rock where he had put the bundle and left. When Bill got home that evening, he told Ida what he had done. She said, next spring, I'm going to plant that Indian corn. If he's going to help us hold up the roof of Section 17, Slick better be able to help me break up that clay dirt soon, too. Bill smiled and chuckled at Ida's remark. Nodding his head, he agreed. Yeah, Slick will help. Thank you. I'll read one more poem from my newest book that was mentioned just a moment ago, if I can find it here, because I marked it, but that working. And then go into our conversation. It's preceded by a poem that a friend named Jack Hirschman, who passed away last year. And Jack was quite an extraordinary poet. He's one of the best poets really from this area. And I knew him in person, of course, back from when I used to live here in San Francisco, back in the 1970s. And, I left and then came back later in the 1980s for less than 2 years. First time was about 6 years or so. Anyway, I'll precede this poem called Moon Croon by Red Boy, a poem for Jack Hirschman. Moon, moon this morning, moon as I was climbing the fence, moon sitting on top of the house across the street, moon that is nigh to many. Moon morning that is 5:20 clock time. Moon doesn't count time. Moon to light the world, moonlight, light, light, light. Moon mentions Antonin Artaud. Moon odd sense of life. Moon minds its own. Moon light, light on Artaud's face. Moon mentioned this morning. Moon and theater with cast of 420 plus. Moon, my interest in theater goes back to college. Moon and Artaud's imagination as reality. Moon dreams, thoughts, delusions, realities. Moon no less real than reality. Moonlight and dark Jack Hirschman did a book, Moon called Artaud anthology publisher City Lights. Moon was maybe nigh to Artaud. Moon, who knows dark, who knows light as real, real, real. Moon tonight I'll look for. Moon morning will come real as reality always. And then to end with, forever is true. Forever is true? Question. Yes, I remember. Forever is true, quote unquote. Even repetitions are true. Sand, 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 so many grains, too many to keep track. They made the world countless, so true, same with forgetters. Facts are ever evolving and ever multiplying baby snakes. Under the deep waters, so deep, deep, deeper, even deeper. And above that, as in above our head for numbers is space. In space is space. Space we can't measure, just live within. Space so much, so endless. Horizons are means of vision. So space endless makes endless sense like air, breathing air. Living as breath, each intake and outtake again, again, again. Ah, yes, above that is beyond. Here, hold your hand up, 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 and fingers pointed up with your little finger on the Big Dipper and thumb on the evening star, and sun too close for comfort. Orange, red, yellow, fierce flares forever. Even memory burns instantly, constantly. Away tattoos take, making lasting futures. Memories too soon, though. Red Boy heard that. But you know, he's so gullible, his own mom says, she says with a and says he heard forever is true. He should talk. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you. Poetry is very, very, what do you call it? And it helps us really to share oneself with others. I think poetry is a spiritual experience and spiritual nurturing of ourselves, especially when we express ourselves in such almost an impossible way to do, when life is almost so crushing, I guess, sometimes. So we have to take breaths with our minds and, of course, with our lungs in order to be able to maintain ourselves and have a sense of fulfillment. Sometimes when things are falling apart, maybe we're falling apart, or we're falling into meaninglessness. But poetry can enhance us, enhance our struggle, our ongoing tough times, and can help us fulfill what we want. Especially when I use the word share at the beginning of my presentation. To share with each other, sometimes that almost impossible sense of being overcome by, say, negativity, or a sense of things going wrong, even if you can't exactly define them, but something is taking place and we're under pressure, from by ourselves as well as from others, and from circumstances, from things taking place, and maybe life as a whole. And when I write, I think that this enters into my poems, my poetry. I brought a number of books that I should have gone ahead and ordered books so that they could be on sale, but I only have, this is the latest. The University of Arizona Press are reissuing older books they're not new books. I mean, they're actually put new covers on them, but the poems are still the same. And somehow it's, I think, a sense of helping to, helping us to help me to keep on believing in the poems that I wrote back when and still have meaningfulness today. Like that story, that I read to you, something that's positive. Because working together and sharing with each other is a way of reinforcing ourselves, relinking in a manner of speaking, but recovering what yesterday was. We may not have ended up on a good note personally for ourselves, but that it's possible, the next day, this morning, or 5 minutes ago, that or though this poem forever is true, a poem that anyway, this last I always remember Jack Kirschman because he was funny in his own special world. Himself, yes, but himself and many others, the world of life around him. So anyway, let's go into the conversation that you may want to provoke. Just these few remarks that I made, and of course, poems and stories that I hear from me.
audience members, it doesn't make you louder, but it registers on the recording. And
Yeah,
so-
I think that the voice, my voice carries, right?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
All right, we have even helpers with.
Yes, questions from the audience, and Melissa here has a mic, Marissa has a mic that you can,
Questions or comments?
yeah.
Hi. My question is, when you're writing your poetry, how do you decide how to use the space on the page?
Say that again.
So we read from Sand Creek last week in this class, and one of the things we were looking at was the way you put the words on the page. And I was wondering what process you use to decide when you're writing your poetry, how to put the words on the page and use the blank space.
Well, it's like when we are in a conversation with each other, you know, we do our best to understand what is being asked or what the subject or topic is brought up, and of course there's all kinds of or numbers of responses that one can make. You know. But I think that you know what I tend to do is to not just guesswork, but I think that what strikes me most about the topic or question that you are asking, you know, and answer from my perspective, personal perspective, as best I can, best meaning the best I can understand. You know, I don't think any of us are what do you call it? Wordless. You know, I mean, we could always answer, "I don't know," but maybe that is sometimes the case. But usually, we mean, "I don't know exactly what to say," but you know, we offer some kind of response. And so, when you're writing poetry, I guess you know, sometimes I am very, what do you call it, single-minded about a specific response to whatever I understand, and base my response, or base my answer, or base my what I choose to say on kind of a reaction. I know that's you know sort of reaction may be that I truly don't know, or maybe I don't want to answer, or but if I answer, I just don't know. And that sincere expression of myself.
Thank you.
Here's
Hello. You mentioned briefly coming from past works that you've done and trying to reconnect with them and reconnecting with them through new editions and
yeah.
coming in with reading them for people. When you put something down, do you feel that it's you, or do you still feel connected? At what point do you look at something and feel as though it's not like that you don't necessarily connect with it in the same way? The passage of time. What is that like for you?
To me, I think that I can respond simply as myself, but that's not much of an answer. But I think that we also respond with kind of a world sense of ourselves. I mean, this is kind of in general inclusive of everything that's taking place, and often we go traveling into other things that may not be related, but we include. And so I think as a writer, sometimes you feel like limited if you only reply to your question, but what you really are trying to communicate is that the whole other possibility or potential for whatever the topic may be about. I think that like story writing, when I was writing that story that I read, I worked in the mines, the uranium mine, as part of the, what do you call it, a refinery. It was a refinery plant for Kerr McGee, that was the name of the company, it's the Oklahoma firm. And Grants High School in June, and I went to apply and I was hired because we were, in a sense, the local population. They were the people who were willing to work for the wages that the company paid, and as cheap labor, and then of course we eventually got better, more skilled job. But anyway, so my outlook then was that I'm a high school kid who needs some money. I had planned to go to college a year or two later on, and always felt that money, earning the bucks was the thing to do at that time. Before, most of our childhood had been pretty restricted to not much money, not much skill and training and so forth. And uranium mining was new in the region, the exploitation of land and its resources, and some of the resources of human labor. So anyway, so like the questions involved, my personal way of thinking, personal things that involved my family, and it wasn't just me answering it. What I felt the question or topic included, which was everything. And when we're young, we do take life seriously. We do take like being here as a student at the university. You're answering your I guess the goal is all of your life, really. It's not just this hour. It's not just more than just going through class this week. That on this stage, it's your whole life. So I don't know. The answer, or the discussion. You're dealing with the reality, which is the whole of your life. Yes.
Thank you.
When I write, I tend to include what is not only taking place in my life, but what I project, out there involving others. Because in a sense, it's like singing. You know, I sort of sing, and you know, I know that you all listen to music, and music is, I think, an art that not only is directed for the self, but it's really directed for others. You know, not just ourselves, but other people who are listening and enjoying and need music and need art in our life. Just like, you know, I was invited here because of my writings, and I had always wanted to be, I just feel once upon a time I wanted to be a chemist. That means that I would have to get a degree in college to get a education in chemistry and eventually become a technologically minded chemist. But I also felt some urge to express myself, you know, express myself. And that's what I eventually decided that was worth paying attention to the life I was living and writing from that as the source of what would become my full story or song. Art is what we all do. Sometimes we may not think we are really artists, but we are in some, I would say, interior life. You know, we are all in need of art, and we do live art within the spirit of ourselves. Well, I enjoy really speaking with all of you. You know, I know that if we sat down or took a walk together, we would converse, and the conversation is sharing our experiences as people. And going back to what I started with about sharing, I think important to share. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question, and it goes back to the very beginning of your reading. And I think maybe the students were thinking that I was spying on you or something, because the first thing you did was to say, you read a poem saying, I had not been paying attention to my dreams, you know? And a week ago, we had an assignment, which was to write down the dream 5 days in a row, you know? And so that's what everyone has done over this past week, is they've been being attentive to their dream. And so I guess my question then is how do you think about dream? Like when in the poem with Jim Pepper, like, how, you know, like, why do you think we should go back and listen to Dream?
Dreams are, I think, very, very, to me, personally, it's making use, the mind's use of the information that we can get from dreams, the information that may be based on something that happened or maybe an experience that you have had. And it comes from you, but it comes also from whatever that experience is. You know, and if we are kind of like restrictive of our dreams and maybe even tell ourselves that they're not important and not paying attention to it. But I think dreams are very informative of our of ourselves. Information that our mind, in the matter of speaking, which is almost separate from us, the mind works on its own. And we can learn from that mind, even if it's not seeming to be related to us, because it is, we are connected to it, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. The dream has thought that has been contrived or brought together by forces that we are not fully aware of. I think that the dream is made in order to make us pay attention to ourselves, to make us feel like, hey, you're just dismissing your dreams. Sometimes we may even get angry at ourselves for having dreams because we don't want to remember something, we don't want to deal with something, we don't want to acknowledge that what we did was bad and in terms of harm that may have taken place. So we don't want to remember it. Yet our dream mechanism, whatever the mechanism is, I've been in therapy during the alcohol treatment times, and I know that they're useful, but I know that I also did not want to face, the truth, the reason for those behaviors, and to admit. So there are a defense mechanisms that we could bring up and say by even dismiss those mechanisms. So dreams are I think, very important. Right? Even the scary one. Maybe especially the scary one. No? Well, that is no. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Who are your greatest influences? Like, who are your favorite writers?
This morning, I remember I was reading T.S. Eliot last night before I went to sleep. And this morning I remembered what I was reading, and in that book Quartet, and I've always been, years ago when I first encountered the work of I would say honesty in dealing with not only himself, but I think that T.S. Eliot as himself, but also with his nation, with the idea of, and the being of America, this nation, this sense of community that we have wrought by choice, because and he was pretty, I would say, harsh with that vision and version that he had, and the idea anyway. So T.S. Eliot was one of those voices, from my high school English teacher that I give credit to. So some authors, that I admire, I think I admire them because they're ways in which I need to be honest with myself, with things that I need to deal with, and T.S. Eliot is one of those writers for me. And I think that in the contemporary, I have denied myself the enjoyment of current contemporary literature. I pick up a book and gaze through some of the writing, but has that power of T.S. Eliot.
Thank you.
Good question. More? Yeah.
Of all the stories and poems that you've written, are there any that you consider favorites?
Say that again.
Of all your poems and stories that you have written, do you have any that you would consider a favorite or a handful of favorites?
Yeah. I guess what I write is what I experience. Sometimes it may sound like, is it something that has to do with maybe that I'm bothered by, that I need to clarify to myself, or is it an opinion that I'm bothered by? And I respond to that in my own way, in my own, I guess, sense of it, what do you call it, intense scrutiny. Especially when I think about why does it bother me, or why is it giving me a sense of somehow being challenged? If I disagree with this writer, or is it the idea, or the concept, or what? That I need to look at, that I then maybe write something that is a poem, or maybe an essay. I'm working on, I guess, an idea for an epic that I've never really tried, but I think that it's important because it's a look at oneself within an idea. An epic that looks at the history, not only of oneself, but the history within which we live, here in America or in this world. And it's self-examination as much as it is an examination of the institutions that we are living or told that we're living with a form of government and a certain political ideals and a sense of who I am and who we are, questioning and offering, basic reasons for your, for our maybe disagreement and trying to be articulate and I don't know if wise is the right word, but what does that mean to me and you? So I think that the epic is it's an examination for me that it's not an expressive one mainly, but one is required, I think, to express how it is for himself or myself or himself or ourselves. I think that writing is a challenge. Sometimes even with language itself. I'm speaking English because that's the language that we all understand. I also speak in my own Asia saying, yeah, and it's being suited for the way that I know in my own language. There are differences, but basically they're also like English or other languages, there are self-exams with some kind of insight into what being or idea of yourself or himself. Good question. Good questions are necessary. Yes. Yes. Boston.
Speaking of sharing, it's such a privilege to be sharing the space with you and get to listen to your work in your own voice. My question is that you talked about poetry and storytelling as forms of sharing experiences and sharing spaces. I wonder how do you use your unique culture and language as resources for writing in a foreign language or a second language to share with readers who are not familiar with the culture where you're coming from or where you grew up or with its traditions and with its language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The quotation that you
Is how do you use your language and culture as resources for writing in another language and sharing that with readers and listeners who are not familiar with your culture and language otherwise?
well, I think what comes about for me is there are differences between languages, and I think that that difference is really important to pay attention to because it's not that languages are all going to be the same, but they're going to differ because of our different locations, and what we use language for, and what we need to do with that language. When I say in my own native language, the style, this is the way that I know myself. In English, we can say that in the way that I said it, this is the way that I know myself. But there's also, linguistically, it's not the same. The same idea is there, but it's also different in how we conceptualize the meaning. When I say I know myself, when I say this is the way that I know myself, you are also including the cultural awareness of where that language comes from, the cultural links and the cultural sources of that language. It's not just word for word translation, but it's also supported by, let's say, cultural source knowledge that is part of being. So we should not ever regard that when I repeat something in English from a indigenous American source, we have to look at and consider the cultural foundation and cultural meanings as well as just the verbal and technical word sounds and how it impacts us. Or even like the term that I don't much use. I say, I made mention of a while ago, Indian. Indian is a word that is too easily applied to indigenous people. Too often, really, in a very kind of almost automatic, responsive way, to designate those people who are kind of limited in our imagination or in our vast way of assigning certain identities. They come from that reservation, they speak Indian language and without much thought. But we don't call ourselves Indian necessarily. We call ourselves people who are from here, the people from local lands and what the land consists of and what that means in terms of the cultural awareness and cultural substantiation. Particularly the substance of that meaning comes from the customs, not just the language, but what is included along with simply beyond or more than just the language meaning or verbal meaning, but cultural meaning as well. things like philosophy and ways of thinking of history, and ways in which there is a difference, very substantial, which most people not understand or consider. So that's a good question that you asked. An awareness of each other as different people. None of us are the same as the other person. We're different people. Yet we agree in many cases, in most cases, that we are like one another. We all speak English in this case. But there are other languages that which have a different history, different background, and different meanings. Sometimes subtle, not very open things, but there are enough differences so that we have to include those. And to communicate is really, of course, where we come to, again, that word sharing. Even sharing a common topic. We have our own personal, maybe even private views of what this contraption is. I guess it's a speaker. Technically. That we make use of, so that life is possible to communicate through such contraptions. Like today, we use computers a lot, and our laptops are computers. But do we all do it? A big part of the population does, but there are people who don't. Do we then not communicate with them? Well, we can still talk and still work together or live together and live normally with each other with those differences. And I think that with those differences, I think more sharing is important. I think that we all share, whether we want to or not, share the air for one thing. We share water, we share food, we share being with each other and being in the same room. I think that really is helpful. Well, I think that it's been a good afternoon, and it's wonderful that we can offer each other's, I think, knowledge. Because to me, that's what sharing is. It's sharing of knowledge with one another. And I'm glad and happy and thankful that I'm a writer. I wasn't always a writer. I had other dreams, I suppose you could say. Like being a chemist, I don't know if I would have been happy. I'm happy being a writer. And I think a certain amount of success is it's okay to be positive about it. And whatever you do and whatever your life leads to, be thankful for that. Be appreciative. Thanking ourselves especially. So I thank you for your attention and what you have offered to me as well. Okay. Estaba, pues, you que estudiando, much very cool. And how to go through go forth from here, so that you appreciate yourself. And thankful for it. That's what I said to them. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There's a little stretch break, and I'll have an assignment before you guys take off. Those of you who are in the class, those of you who want to stick around and have an assignment. You're good.